What's up, everybody? Peter X, this whole coffer here, and welcome to another episode of the Purple Manifesto, where we look at the one and only Prince Rogers Nelson. So yeah, you probably have heard there's a bunch of controversy going on. So they call this the Prince Netflix documentary controversy and branding, because I think hey, there's a lot going on here. To give some opinions, and then I'm going to take a little different approach than some people, towards the end. So let's get jumping in here. So Ezra Edelman is the man behind the documentary, so to speak. I don't know if producer, executive producer, whatever the title is. And he signed up to do the film back when the estate was still under the control of Comerica, the bank, before it was sold and whatnot. I mean, this is even while they were, outside of his siblings, people were still coming forward and saying, hey, I'm Prince's kid, and we know what happened with that. So it was originally supposed to be 6 hours. He did it to 9. And some of the things I swore, so I did a bunch of different takes on this from some people who've seen it on YouTube. Pablo Torre, Torre, finds out is one of the main ones because they both saw it. I wouldn't call them Princeologists like myself. I mean, they were sort of Prince fans, but not hardcore. Now, one of the interesting things is a lot of people, only Princeologists who've seen it, to my knowledge, is Questlove. And Questlove was very affected by it, and we'll get to that later. So yeah, to make a long story short, I mean, the estate, or whoever, the owners of the vault and whatnot and controlling everything, has said we're not putting it out. So let's dive in. I've looked at some of the things out there that they didn't like, and we will discuss. So Ezra Edelman, as I said before, is the man behind it. Spent 5 years making it. He did OJ Made in America, and that was very well received. He got what did he get here for that? He won an Oscar and an Emmy in the same year. For Best Documentary, he also won a Peabody for OJ Made in America. I did not watch that. I was alive, in college during the whole OJ thing, and it was exhausting. It went on forever, and this is right when we went from CNN to CNN and MSNBC, and MSNBC was obsessed with this. It was everywhere, and you couldn't get away from it. So I didn't want to go back there. But Ezra also did some 30 for 30s, ESPN, Requiem for the Big Ten, and Magic and Bird, a courtship of rivals, and I have seen both of those and liked those. So I am familiar with Ezra Edelman's work. Let's see here. Now, interestingly enough, so Ezra's mother is Marion Wright Edelman. She comes out of the civil rights movement. She was an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. then. She led the Children's Defense Fund for a long time. So she's the founder and the president. So my man has roots in the civil rights movement. And the other big thing is the New York Times piece done by Sasha Weiss. And this is what got everybody's attention, because Sasha had seen it. And, everybody pretty much lost their damn mind after, Sasha printed a piece on this. It's pretty long. So, shall we go to the big reveals first? Let's go. let's go look at some, before we go to the big reveals about what's making this documentary so controversial. Let's clear up some things that Sasha Weiss, and this is coming out of the Pablo show I mentioned earlier, that we have a much clearer perspective of Prince's childhood now. Back, when Purple Rain came out, we were told that was loosely based on his childhood. Well, no. This is a full-on bio from the sounds of it. Tyka, Prince's full-blooded sister, younger than him. The other siblings are half-siblings. Grew up in a house with him. She, confirmed that, Prince's dad beat their mom. And then, so the narrative over the years has gone that, this Prince early on, very early on, this is probably 1999. But, he said sister actually happened, and it turns out in this, in this documentary that, and they asked enough people, and Prince told enough people that, yes, that happened. His older sister in New York, half-sister. Tyka did say that, there was an abusive home, and spousal abuse. What else? So here's what we knew beforehand is that, Prince from middle school to high school stayed at, in the basement of Andre Anderson, who later became Andre Simone in this band, their home. And so we always knew it was a messed up childhood. I think after after he passed, Prince was locked in the room for a while, and for days. And this, I don't know, it was sort of out there in the wind, when he was alive, but this became a stronger piece of his upbringing narrative, and this is now, in the documentary, this is also confirmed with multiple people, and it looks like it went for 6 weeks. Prince said his dad caught him with some girls, and dad was religious, kicked him out, went and stayed with his mom, didn't get along with his stepdad. Well, the stepdad is the one who locked him in the room. And over the years, I think there's about 4 or 5, maybe 6 documentaries on Reels /Views. And over the years, the locking in the room has become, a staple. They've gone back and reshot these a couple times, since his death. And so, we got a little bit of they're a little more professional than people can give them credit for, but they are dialoguing with people around him and some of the biographers. So that's what, the other big thing is, early on, I'm talking about this pre-1999 era, Prince did mention that, his mother introduced him to pornographic magazines. Well, that was kind of shot down because, people were like, well, later his mother, became a social worker for the Minneapolis school system. Well, I mean, if the spousal abuse is going on, it very well could have happened. I mean, it was a, pretty dysfunctional situation from what Tyka says. And so we're starting to get a clear picture, of Prince's childhood. I've been, strolling around YouTube as, the fallout from, the cancellation of the documentary. I know there's also been allegations of one of the things that they said on this Pablo show, Pablo Torre, Tore, finds out. They also, they mentioned, they saw all 9 hours. There was 2 of them on the show, and they were just like, man, Prince's family just treated him like crap. Well, one of the other things out there is Prince's half brother Dwayne Nelson, who's a little older, and I know, he actually served in the security for Prince for a while, but he did some therapy, and his daughter was on YouTube, and it was all bleeped out because it was pretty explicit. But Dwayne Nelson claims that he and Prince were sexually abused by a family member. So even if that's, not, whether that's true or not, and I don't know if that's in the documentary, Prince had a pretty messed up childhood. So, that's coming into full, that's, the big thing that's kind of come, we got, come into focus with at least some of these leaks about the documentary, which, as we all know, abused kids, if not gone through an intensive therapy, can be abusive as adults. So I'm setting that up there. And one of the things too, Prince, again, he talked about, he said Sister is Real, talked about his mom, introduced him to porn, talking about the different aspects of abuse, and no one believed him. And it's kind of sad in a way because, when we look at Michael, everybody kind of understood Michael's pain and whether, he abused, boys or not. At least, his childhood, was taken away, and he did a song called Childhood. Prince didn't get that treatment. I know, I've read most of the biographies out there now, and seen many different documentaries on Prince. And one of the things that a couple people, and I believe his manager, Alan Leeds, who, once was the tour manager for James Brown going back to the 70s, I remember him saying in the interview once that Prince was the loneliest person he had ever met. And a couple other people said that. Well, when you're abused and no one believes you and you have to walk it back, it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. And that's not an indictment on anybody around him. It's just, people didn't believe that, his childhood could be that screwed up. Okay, the big reveals, the one that, of course, shook everybody. I'm coming, and now I want to say up front, and I read all the comments, on YouTube from the Prince fans, and for the most part, the hardcore and the Princeologists have said none of this is new. We knew all this. Well, yeah, most of it. The Jill Jones thing, which I'll get to in a minute. That I was kind of like, whoa. But again, get to that in a minute. But yes, a lot of this stuff was known. If you're a hardcore Prince fan and you've really studied him, and the Princeologists, and maybe some of them even knew about the Jill Jones situation. That was new to me. So let's get to the Jill Jones situation. She said sometime in 1984 she was with a friend, and this is via Sasha Weiss, who had seen, reporting on some of the things she saw in the New York, in her New York Times piece. Now Sasha, and going back to the folks in the Pablo Torre Finds Out show, they're both they're not hardcore Prince fans. They're I guess casual Prince fans. But they thought the documentary was well done, and they're bigger Prince fans since seeing the 9 hours. But let's do my Gemini thing, jumping around. But Jill Jones. So Jill Jones says in 1984, she's at a hotel room with a female friend, and Prince started kissing her, and she didn't like it, and so she smacked Prince. And Prince's response was, bitch, this ain't a television show. And then, smacked her in the face, and then they got a little out of hand, and Prince started punching her in the face. So when I first saw that, I was like, this is before I did this is very early in the Sasha Weiss piece, and I was like, well, I wasn't there, number one. Number two, but it's plausible because I said earlier, abused people can be abusive. So yeah, so that's the big reveal out of it that has a lot of people pissed, and lots of threats going Jill Jones's way. Don't agree with that. Again, I wasn't there. It's not her story to tell, but going to the end, what was I, this is supposed to be on Netflix, and according to on Funktopia, the host of Funktopia, who's a big Prince fan, read a release, that Jill Jones's a PR person put out, and the PR person said that this allegation was vetted seriously by Netflix with their lawyers, because they wanted to cover all their legal bases, being liable, being what else? What are all the things you kind of look at with that? Libel, slander, does it meet a certain legal standard of plausibility, etc. And they greenlit the story. So, I mean, from what this press release said, she went to some of Prince's people, probably his management, and yada, yada, yada. So this was known, wasn't known, the rank and file, because Prince has always had a pretty big, people around him doing different things. And so what that means too is, it was verified by numerous people, of the Prince, alumni who are still alive, who are aware of this situation. I assume they talked to Jill Jones. I assume that they saw Jill Jones after this. I assume that they talked to Prince. And we'll get to this later. Prince, I'm assuming at least to some of them he fessed up to it. So this, Netflix was ready to run with this, and people are mad at Jill, but what you do is you ask multiple, when these explosive things come up, you ask multiple people, and when you start, multiple people start saying yes or verifying this, then you dig deeper, and that's what Ezra Edelman did here. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We've known that Prince had a pretty messed up childhood, and we know people, what happens to abused children, how they act out sometimes. So, yeah, so obviously people are mad at, and the Prince fandom are mad at Ezra as well, because they think he's trying to trash Prince, and again, the people who've seen it, they've all were blown away by it, and it gives a very detailed description of Prince. Another interesting thing is, Prince had worked on 2 or 3 documentaries that he himself did over the years, which is kind of interesting because most people don't do documentaries on themselves. According to which, now this is a little interesting because this contradicts what, one thing that the Ezra camp, said. And so one of the things that when Ezra agreed to do this, and Ava DuVernay was the filmmaker, not a documentarian. She was had the gig first and then walked away from it for whatever reason. We don't know. But Ezra got access to the vault, and one of the interesting things is that now, this is the only kind of weird thing I'm seeing coming from Ezra, because, again, he's very well respected as a documentarian. He's never been accused of, lying in any of his documentaries. He's probably the best documentarian of his generation. I need to see his documentary on Stax. But all of his documentaries have been very well regarded. And as I said, I've seen 2 of them. So, but he did say that, there wasn't much in the vault, and it was all curated. And so, which was interesting, him saying it was curated. But it's interesting that, if it's all curated and Prince is doing, he's doing his own documentaries on himself. Now, he did come out that, he was asking fellow, musicians to describe him using one word, and supposedly Eric Clapton and Miles Davis used the word controlling. Well, I mean, if you have any awareness of Prince, and this goes back to, heck, even the 80s, we knew Prince was kind of a control freak. And if you abused it makes sense. So, here's the other bombshell that's dropped in this as well. And so Prince has been, there might be a pattern here of Prince when it comes to grooming women. And that goes into the control freak thing. Maite, he meets Maite at 15, and there's a weird courtship, and he meets the parents and gets permission, and they spend alone time, but nothing sexual ever happens until she's 18. And Prince is mid to late 30s when this is happening. And this was known. Maite talks about it in her book, but, Maite's version of it and Prince's version on camera, whether it's on Oprah or other, when this was happening, this is also when he was fighting Warner Brothers and had this symbol and the slave on his face going on. But, Prince, so how did you and Maite meet? Well, I got this tape, she was 15 and she was a dancer, and I loved her, was really intrigued as a dancer, and, we met, and I sort of fell in love with her. So that's straight from Prince's mouth. Back in the 90s, folks didn't use the term grooming, but Elvis Presley did the same thing, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. I'm not, excusing it, but it looks like, and then Nona Gay, they were 19 when Prince, started dating her, and Prince was in his 30s as well. So did he meet her before, she was of age? And then that's another YouTube channel that's sort of delving into these other things once the leak of the documentary. And this other documentary also talks about, he also maybe groomed Manuela, his second and last wife. Well, she was 24 when they married, so I don't know. They offered no, context or proof with no negator or Manuela, but they, Pablo Torre finds out that show they talk about the grooming aspect of Prince, but they defend Prince and they say Prince groomed everybody. And if you look at Morris Day, Morris, when he leaves Prince, his first album's called The Character. Prince formed his whole character, and I read Morris's biography, and some of it he talks to Prince. He hated, being in that cage of the gigolo, and Prince created that for him, but he made peace with it. He said, hey, I made a good living as a gigolo and whatnot, that this gigolo character. But, his first album was called The Character, and he was, so, men in some ways, Morris, was groomed. And I guess in the documentary, they kind of it wasn't just women, that's just Prince's thing. Now, we knew, we known for years since the 80s that Prince was in control, was a control freak, and, control, grooming is part of, being that. Now, the thing I want to say is, Prince, in my opinion, seems to have mellowed out by the early 2000s. I mean, we'll get to some of the stuff, from the Prince podcast, the podcast Juice with, Michael Dean and Big Sexy, but Big Sexy is, remember, it's a journey, and yes, I mean, Prince worked a lot of this stuff out, throughout life, and became better with the people around him, for the most part. I mean, Morris, talks about in 2007, the infamous 777 concerts, and if you're not familiar with that, I need to find them, but, well, I think, actually, they're on YouTube. I just need to listen to them. So, July 7th, 2007, big day. Prince plays, I think, Macy's, and then early afternoon, and then plays the Target Center where the Minnesota Timberwolves play that night, and then does a follow-up concert, at First Avenue. Now, they're all across the street from each other, and this is significant because it was the last time Prince played the Target Center and First Avenue. So these concerts are on YouTube, by the way, and I've been meaning to run them down and listen to them, but I am. But, Morris was invited. He brought his band in, and Prince basically dissed him. He wouldn't even let him in, and backstage or whatever. And I believe Wendy and Lisa, made an appearance. I don't know if it was the last time he made an appearance with Wendy and Lisa. But anyway, we're, again, so yeah, I mean, Questlove, said after seeing the documentary, he had to call his therapist, and he cried until he couldn't see. So there's not, some of the things here in this documentary are not the best. Going back to Jill Jones, I mean, we know about the Sinead O'Connor things that she said over the years. I don't know how much deeper. I'm sure it's mentioned in the documentary. The interesting thing is Prince never addressed publicly the Sinead O'Connor stuff at all. One of the other unpleasant things is, after Prince's son passed, Amir, he kind of, eventually they grew apart, and he abandoned Maite. Maite talks about that. He went on Oprah. It was like 2 or 3 weeks after the miscarriage, and acted like nothing had happened. I'm sure it's on YouTube. And he talked about the baby being here when the baby wasn't here. I remember all those Prince fans were glued to it and watched it. It was kind of weird, and I'm sure, in retrospect, it wasn't what Maite needed, clearly. Another big reveal, this is one, so Londell McMillan, who oversees the estate, gave the 17-page, thing, 17 pages of things he would like deleted. He gave that to Ezra Edelman, and one of these things was in the 2000s, when Prince was thinking about getting the Revolution back together. He told Wendy she needed to renounce her being a lesbian, or it wouldn't happen, and they wanted that out. Well, the problem is Prince in the interview in 2008 said, basically condemned homosexual marriages, and then publicly came out after his blowback on it and apologized. So nothing new there. Why do they need to take that out? I knew about that. That's on Google, I mean, is it a dick move to force your former band, your, rhythm guitarist to say that publicly to get the band back together? Probably, but, we knew, once he, became more religious in the 2000s, that's where he went, and that's where he was at. Interesting thing now coming out of here let me see here, going back here to Pablo Torre finds out, Ezra focuses on, the infamous concert with James Brown where he calls on Mike when he calls on Prince. I love this, even though Prince, I guess the common lore of it was, Prince, Michael comes up, he sings, he dances, he does his, he moonwalks and twirls and whatever, and he says Prince is out there, and then James calls up Prince, and so Prince takes the guitar from James's guitarist and tries to play it, and everybody says, well, it's out of tune. Well, it wasn't out of tune. I mean, there's many different ways to tune the guitar, and it wasn't tuned to what Prince was used to. And so he does a couple funky chords and then hands it back to him. I didn't think it sounded horrible, but I thought it was more funny. I mean, Prince dances a little bit. He takes off his top and then he goes over to the edge of the stage, and there's a fake lamppost, and he leans up against it. The lamppost is essentially rubber, and he falls off the stage. Not the best, when you have, two legends and Prince falls off the stage. I know in the interview, Susan Rogers, his what do you call it? Sound engineer, for his big albums in the 80s was there, and she talked about how devastated he was. And that's the other time too. She said, I'd never seen somebody look so alone in my life after that happened. So, Prince was crushed. He was devastated. I mean, did that feel some of the rivalry, the frenemy stuff with him and Michael in the 80s? Who knows? They talk about that, and then they move forward to, his live, his big, the opposite, his live triumph, while my guitar gently weeps, that, the vicious soul, he does, on stage with Tom Petty and Steve Winwood and other Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, and Tom Petty's loving it, and Donnie Harrison's loving it, and some of the other Hall of Famers weren't real happy about it, and later kind of, and Donnie Harrison, George Harrison's son, sort of walks it back, but you could tell he loved, because Prince put on the show, and it was masterful. Tom Petty he always yeah, that's just Prince being Prince. I loved it. My thing was, hey, if you're gonna, if you ask Michael Jordan to play pickup basketball and he dunks on you, don't get mad, because it's just Michael being Michael, and that was Prince being Prince. Here's the backstory. I think is interesting. So Questlove has picked up on this, and this is in the documentary, and supposedly the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is, the big guy behind that is also behind Rolling Stone. And the year before, Rolling Stone did the top 100 guitarists, and Prince was not on the list. Well, I did a whole episode on Prince the guitar, and this will be part of Prince lore. I don't want to, in mythology, But here's my take. I remember reading that back in the day, and I remember thinking to myself, 33 is a bit low. I remember Prince being 33rd on the list. That's a bit low. But if you just base it off of their released material to the public, it is probably accurate. I do have a collector's edition from 2011 on their initial, 100, and Prince is 33. So, and I checked it yesterday. So literally, this is, I'm not going to start a fight with Questlove, because I love Questlove. I mean, the only drummer in history who, actually plays drums in a hip hop band regularly. So, but this is new. This is the new mythology that's coming out of this. Yeah, I mean, Prince was in their reissue was, 2011. Prince never said anything publicly, so why would they add him, later? And they did, I think, a 2014 and a 2015, new edition of a collector's edition of that. So as of 2011, and as I said, I remember buying it back in the day. It was 2004, 5, 6 when it came out. And look, if Prince wasn't on that list, I would have been like, what the fuck? Now last year they put out the 200 and Prince was 14 on that. Better, but is it good enough? I don't think so. So this is one of the new mythologies coming out of this. I said my piece on it. No biggie, mythology is cool and it's great for branding. I'm going to put out what I remember, what I've seen, but hey, it is what it is. And if folks want to, it's probably, this guitar solo is probably one of Prince's, other than the Super Bowl halftime show, one of his biggest, live televised things, events of all time. And people love it. And I love it. I wear it out. If every single year when it comes to, my Spotify most played, they've been doing it for 3 years now. And hey, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is in the top 3 every year. Another thing, pattern with Prince. So he would get real close to people and kind of suffocate them, then pull away. Again, that's what abused people do. So, Ezra Edelman calls the documentary soul shredding. He was a Prince fan, but was not a Princeologist. The quote that people keep saying, coming from Edelman is, how can you tell the truth about a person who never told the truth about himself? So, we know going back to, I've covered this in my episode on Prince and his mystique. And Prince, early on, you remember he said his one parent was Puerto Rican, the other was Italian. So Prince, played in controversy, am I straight or am I gay? That was part of that ambiguity that he played into back in the day. And he always did that. So yeah. So, what do I think? Everybody has an opinion. Well, as far as the Jill Jones thing goes, I was not there. I know Funkatopia has had her on. I know Michael Dean and Big Sexy from the Prince podcast, the podcast juice. They've met her. I think Funkatopia, Mr. Christopher from Funkatopia has met her. They all like her. She has a right to tell her story. I'm repeating Big Sexy from, the Prince podcast. It's her story to tell. Obviously the state has shut this down because they're worried about Prince getting, I hate this word, canceled. And I'm going to briefly tell you why. The history of this term canceled. It's white boomers, going after their kids for sticking up for, people of color and gay, and LGBTQ and feminism, when no one else is around to defend that. And then that's where cancel culture comes from. It's older white folks getting pissed because their kids are standing up and fighting them on their bigotry, their sexism, and their racism. We have been, people of color and LGBTQ and women have been canceled since the beginning of this fucking country. So I hate the term canceled. You will not hear it again, but that is the term everybody's used. We have plenty of other terms and communities of color and in these other communities that we use for the same fucking thing. So yeah, I don't like the term. So, the state is not going to release this. I think about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, they announced that. And, I'm okay with it, honestly, because That's not their job. Their job is to promote Prince. Again, I don't think it's going to adversely affect him. I mean, look at Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, as of 2023, had no singles, no songs with over 1 billion streams. Here we are sitting in 2025. He has now 3 or 4 songs with 1 billion streams. And this is post, Finding Neverland. He also sold half of his catalog for $600 million, and there's the other half. So I'm assuming they split the catalog in half. I'm assuming Off the Wall and Thriller and Bad was that first half, and then Dangerous and then History, Blood on the Dance Floor / Blood on the Dance Floor, and Invincibles that second half. So 600 million. More hits in that first half, so we'll probably get at least 400 million for the second half, so $1 billion. I'm not I can't remember what happened with the Pink Floyd. They were and Queen, so Queen might beat Mike and beat $1 billion. Pink Floyd was flirting with that, but Roger Waters and David Gilmour are fighting, and it's more on Roger Waters than David Gilmour, but that's another story. So no, I don't think this is gonna hurt Prince's legacy. Look, it's already out there. That's why we're talking about it. It's already been late. I think when people get a chance to process this, as I said earlier, I went through the comments. 5 years ago, people would have been lost their damn mind, and I don't know if if the Prince fandom is, because there is the crazy wing of the Prince fandom, and some of that is still out there, but it was about 50-50. Release it, 50% don't. I am. I'm a lot more nuanced when it comes to releasing it. I'll be honest with you. I mean, if I was Londell McMillan, I wouldn't release it because the fan base is nuts, part of it, and it's not worth the headache. But you have to look at what the job of the estate is, to make money and to protect Prince, even though I don't think, it's going to harm Prince's reputation. They, why take that risk? I mean, the music industry, the big wigs, the labels and all that stuff has always been extremely risk adverse. Capitalism in general is risk adverse. They go find the pirates and the outlaws and the stuff doing really interesting shit, at the startup level and buy them up. That's what Apple does. That's what Google does. That's what Microsoft does. Nobody's out there doing, taking a bunch of risks in capitalism, and Londell McMillan is kind of in step with all that. So I know some people are taking shots at Londell McMillan. I'm not, I understand why he's doing it, and I would do it myself. So, and if I was in his shoes, I would do it. Eventually, yes, it will come out. Because I mean, as the fan base, and I think it'll be, 5-10 years. I mean, look what happened when the, Let It Be, the Beatles, there was a Get Back that just, came out, off of Let It Be, and the reaction. This is 50 years later. So, I think the fan base, I think in general, the talking heads and the, what do you call these folks? The influencers, I'm probably, because I have a Prince podcast, they're not being that hard on Londell. Funkatopia wasn't, Michael Dean was not. But, I'm going to sit there, now I've said that, I'm jumping in there with at least with Michael Dean and Big Sexy and the Prince podcast. I want to see it. So, one of the comments in there is like, oh boy, the Black Album's out coming again. And yeah, I mean, if I get a chance to see it before the state releases it, I'm going to watch it, because I'm a Prince, I'm a Princeologist, and Prince has an interesting, he's probably when you talk, Elvis had a huge fandom. The Beatles and Lennon, but Prince, I mean, when you talk, Prince has an aspect to his fandom with some of his fans, and I am one of them, where you look to him as a mentor. Beyonce has that with some of the Beehive, and so, and Taylor Swift has that with the Swifties. So, I mean, if you look at them as a mentor and as a guide, I mean, I study Steve Jobs too. And I look at Prince as Steve Jobs, not just as a songwriter and a musician myself, but also as a businessman, and also as someone who, Prince obviously went through a lot of shit and overcame a lot of shit, and I think that's admirable, and we all go through shit, and sometimes it's good to have someone who's been through that to inspire you when life gets down. Mentioning, I mean, I can separate, the not so good from the good when it comes to people, that I, look to as mentors. I mean, I knew Steve Jobs was an asshole, and I DVR'd the movie on him that, because he wanted to be brutally honest in his biography, and I watched about 10 minutes of that movie and then turned it off. Now, I mean, it was the Steve Jobs that was portrayed and I had heard about. I didn't want to watch it. I wanted to, I'll focus on, the output of Steve Jobs rather than the sausage making, so to speak. With Prince, I mean, this stuff doesn't really kind of diminish Prince, in any way, for me at least. Let's talk about some of the concerns that people raised, particularly in the comments. Netflix caters to millennials and Gen X, and so they will, and I use the word quotes, cancel him. Again, look at what happened to Michael. I don't think they're going to cancel him. One of the interesting things, particularly with Gen X and younger millennials, is, I mean, as a Gen Xer, I remember in my 20s, white Gen Xers in the suburbs had they had pretty normal upbringings. The Gen X with social media and cyberbullying, none of them have had, they did not have, they all had shit that happened to them, and when they were, when they were growing up, and they're still in their 20s. I mean, at one of my former workplaces, I mean, if a Gen Zer said, look, told me one time, confidential, like everybody here, we're either taking something for anxiety or vaping or and that's just this generation. I mean, it's a very different world. So I don't think so. I think, they will, these young folks, because, Prince has overcome, they'll look for that. And he's just such an overpowering and overwhelming, force of nature as an artist. It's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was, it was only 10 to 15 minutes. And then there was a YouTube episode about why Gen Z hates Prince, and there were like literally 200 to 300 comments from Gen Z's like, dude, what the fuck you talking about? We love Prince, and my friends know who Prince is. I love Prince. But no, I don't think that's going to be an issue. One of the interesting things I would, I'll try to put that in the comments, since I don't have that citation for, why Gen Z hates Prince. But he said one of the things that's missing, that Gen Z will miss from Prince, is the controversy that he always stirred up, when he released new music. And, purposefully, he was talking about the mystique thing that I talk about a little bit in my, episode on Prince and the mystique. So, yeah, so going back, again, here's the other thing. I mean, Prince is a public figure. So, I mean, if you're a public figure, everything is pretty much fair game. And I know, there's people pissed off about this, and Funkatopia, he was saying, you all are saying I won't watch it, but damn well, if you're a hardcore Prince fan, you're going to watch it. If it was on Netflix, y'all wouldn't be listening to me right now because he live streamed it. Mr. Christopher said if it was there tonight, you wouldn't be here, you'd be watching it. But Big Sexy, makes from Prince podcast, he said, this is, he's a public figure, and this is, part of being a public figure. Again, going back to this state is a little bit like a museum. Look, I mean, Prince is not, the art world is struggling with Pablo Picasso because, I mean, he probably groomed the other thing, I think, with taking women younger women under and mentoring them and, romance, sleeping with them, sex, all that kind of stuff. And, the art world is really, really struggling with, what to do about Pablo Picasso. But the problem is, you can't erase Pablo Picasso out of art history. I mean, you go to any street fair, or any big, where art's being sold, and Pablo Picasso's all over the place. Jazz has the same problem with Miles Davis. I mean, Miles Davis beat the shit out of multiple women. Hey, but you can't erase Miles Davis from the history of jazz. So, so going back to this state, I mean, if in the museum is, having a showing of Pablo Picasso, they're going to focus on the pieces by Pablo Picasso and the paintings and stuff that they're showing. They're not going to be like, well, yeah, he abused women. No, and that's kind of where the estate is at with Prince and this documentary. Like, that's not our job to throw dirt on, Prince's legacy, and I get it. And I agree, and I'm not gonna, throw shade on Londell McMillan because of that. Because again, I understand I would do it in this, that thing. The interesting, there were 70 people interviewed for this. And so, depending on where you land, I worked in the Indiana House of Representatives for 20 plus years, and I think I worked for 14 different state legislators. So somebody did a documentary on them and negative stuff. I mean, some of my bosses were good, some of them were not so good, but I would not, throw shade on any of them, but again, well, I mean, you're like, well, you want to see the documentary, but you don't, you wouldn't throw shade. Well, I mean, I sit differently, as a Princeologist and as, Prince is one of my mentors. And so, the more information, for me at least, the better. Now, not everybody has a different relationship to Prince and the Prince fandom. So, yeah, I don't blame folks, for not, cooperating or for getting angry, band members and whatnot. I know there was some Kat Glover, before she passed, she posted, they were asking about, do you think, Prince was murdered? Well, there's a certain family member that's looking into, that's pushing that narrative that Prince may have been murdered, and they have the right to do that. But, and it's probably, I mean, this individual is on Facebook or, on YouTube with videos, and is probably trying to get his own documentary pushing it. That's his right. And so if that's out there, then Ezra Edelman has to address that, because it doesn't, if a documentary did get made, then it would like, Ezra, that's a big thing to miss. And so you have to look at the context of things, before flying off the handle on stuff. So here's another criticism of Ezra Edelman that I wanted to talk about, and is that they only do this, they only dig up dirt on black artists, and they don't do this to white artists. Well, let me give you the crown jewel of getting taken down, John Lennon of the Beatles. Because, when I started getting into music, I knew, the late 70s, John Lennon was Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy of the music world. I mean, there was nobody, and he had a following like that. He had a Taylor Swift relationship and a Beyonce relationship with his fan base, and you couldn't tell them anything. He passed, and then the books came out, and it was like 9 hours. 9 hours is, I don't know, it's at a 300 to 500 page biography, something like that. And it's interesting because the early 90s is when all the bios, and the musicians came out. It was very interesting because the Rolling Stone has their own podcast. It is on Spotify, and the younger Gen Xers talk about, who came of age, were in middle school and high school in the early 90s, and reading, the books on Jim Morrison and Hammer of the Gods by Led Zeppelin. These early books, turned them into cartoon characters, and they, literally superheroes. Yeah, so that happened, and then the serious biographers started, looking at people, and John Lennon did not fare really well. It's, several biographers have looked at him. We know, he beat the shit out of his first wife, Cynthia. And, it's just a fact. And Julian, the son out of that relationship, he didn't treat Julian very well. And when he passed, Julian was out of the will. Now, luckily, Julian is back. Went to court over many years, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, got back into the will, and Julian and his younger half brother Sean, who is his son, John's son with Yoko, are buddies. They go out on birthdays. So God bless Sean and God bless Julian. But Mr. Imagine isn't who we thought he was. The other big thing, of course, that came out in the John Lennon books is that, he was all for peace. And this is really that early 70s period when people just swooned and fell in love with because he was the idealist. And his brand, even in the late 70s until he passes, is Imagine. This is like, and the lyrics, love the song, everything else. Well, his life didn't live up to that. And so, when the biographers, dug in, it's like, and, I do a lot of branding on the channel, and, branding 101 is, stick to the facts and don't try to be something that you're not. Because the other thing, again, that happened, he was all anti-war until, Richard Nixon and the federal government decided, they wanted to deport him, and then all of a sudden he wasn't anti-war anymore. And so it's like, well, where's your convictions? It's a little bit of some of the criticism that folks over the years have lobbed at Bob Dylan. I just saw, Christmas that his biopic that, his starts on to come up for him, and then when he goes electric at the Monterey Pop Festival. But Dylan was like, people were like, are you, hey, you had these great political songs in the mid 60s, was that just, did you believe that stuff, or was that just, were you pulling our leg? And so, and I didn't realize even until this movie came out that, Dylan, plays, with the mystique a lot. Surprise, surprise. He's out of Minnesota. Dylan's a Gemini. Prince is a Gemini. I'm a Gemini. Hey, it's kind of what we Geminis do, but, whatever. Yeah, looks like this is going to be my longest episode ever. So, Jay-Z did a song, I need to look this up. I just saw this in the notes, didn't run back, forgot about it, but a song called Purple Eyes where Jay-Z takes shots at Londell McMillan. So, everybody has problems with Londell McMillan, running the estate. He's not kicking out, the vault quick enough and yada, yada, yada. You couldn't pay me to take that job. Londell McMillan was Prince's attorney for a while, and then Prince fired him. Surprise, surprise. But I'm not going after Londell McMillan here at all. Because again, as I said, I would have done the same thing. Um, so, and a little bit of rustle of papers now. Here's a note I made, in one of these after pondering stuff. Ezra Edelman cracked the Egyptian hieroglyphic code when it came to Prince, because he really, as I said earlier, we have a much better, a clear idea of what his childhood was like now. Which, if you're a Princeologist, if you look to Prince as a mentor, that's important. Let's see here. There's another documentary I haven't seen that I need to run down, and I'm just going to mention this here. I heard it was pretty good on YouTube, called Mr. Nelson on the North Side. Now, it looks like just to kick this in, nobody's, saying anything specifically, but, the estate are working on several documentaries, and they will, and you know what, that's probably what documentaries or what aspects of Prince's life would I like to see. That's a future episode I'll do. But so documentaries are coming. The title of the documentary, this is coming out of Funkatopia, The Book of Prince. So that's what Ezra Edelman was going to call it. And let's see here. I was going through my Ezra Edelman notes or my Funkatopia notes. Yeah, another thing with Prince, I've sort of touched on this, but Prince did a lot of things for shock value, so it's always hard to separate what Prince did for shock value from the truth. But I do think we have a clear idea. I do think Ezra did that for us. Going back to, again on Ezra, to just defend him, he is a journalist. He's not there's no way, a method when you find I'm becoming quote unquote dirt. You have to get, verified stuff and all that. And he clearly did that. So here's where I want to, to me, things get really, really interesting coming out of this as a Prince, as a Princeologist, and what Prince means to me, and some people, not everybody. There'll be some disagreements. Look, if you're like, they shouldn't do it, I get it. And as I said, I take different vantage points, as I put myself in different people's shoes. So if I'm in Londell McMillan's shoes, I don't disagree with Londell McMillan did. If I'm in Jill Jones' shoes, she wants to tell her story, and that's part of the healing. I wasn't there. As I said earlier in the episode, it's plausible, and I'll leave it at that. But I'm not going to go at Jill Jones. I'm not gonna. That's her story to tell, and Prince is bigger than that. To be blunt about it. It's part of his journey. And we have to look at the journey, and he had an incredible journey, and he dealt with a lot of crap early in his life, and he did a lot considering all that. As a band member getting upset, or as a Prince alum getting upset with some of the things in this, I get it, just like the fans. But if I played in Prince's band, first of all, I couldn't have played, it would have been 18 months at max, because he was not easy to work for back in the 90s. Now, in the 2000s, differently, yeah. He's a control freak, yada, yada, yada. I've heard the stories, and just how meticulous he was. I remember listening to Eric Leeds, the horn player, and talking about, getting ready for the Love Sexy tour, and spending 3 hours on 15 seconds of the show so that when the drums hit, the lights and the drums are in sync and all this other stuff. I mean, I guess you got to do that stuff. That drive me nuts. It drove Prince nuts too, because that's why Prince started doing after shows, is because the big shows were so scripted he was losing his damn mind again. Gemini. But anyway, but here's where this is starting to get interesting to me. Because, and I'm going to throw this out there, nobody else, I mean, the closest I've seen to this is the hardcore Prince fans saying, yeah, put it out there, I'm going to watch it. There's nothing new here. Here's the different thing, and Big Sexy, on the Prince podcast, podcastjuice.net, alludes to this, and a little bit. He doesn't say it. He kind of, and I don't know if he even meant to say this, but Prince is, he's already a genius. But Prince told us all this stuff. He knew this was coming. And this is where talking about going, we know the man is a genius, but he's in Richard Pryor territory, because, Richard Pryor did Live on the Sunset Strip, and he did half the damn concerts about him lighting himself on fire, and Richard would talk about, his beating up of women and all. I mean, Richard had nothing to hide, and that's one of the geniuses, and that's why Richard Pryor is revered by artists across the spectrum, not just comedians. I mean, hip-hop artists talking about keeping it real. Well, nobody kept it more real than Richard Pryor, because Richard Pryor talked about every fucking thing he did. Rich, get out of my way. I'm leaving. Not in this car, you aren't, and then shot the car. Rich, he fessed up to everything. And if you look at what we know now coming out of Purple Rain, remember Apollonia, jumped ship on Prince and was working with Morris, and what happened? Prince slapped her. I'm pretty sure people like, Prince, we should probably take this out in the movie. And Prince is like, nope, it's staying. Throwing it, when Jerome throws the woman in the dumpster. Again, Prince, we should take that out. Nope, it's staying. And, the abuse by Prince's dad on the mother, Tyka says that's real. So, a lot of that movie's real. And then we get to the song Papa, where Prince talks about, his dad beating him. Then we have a bridge. And in the bridge, Prince says, don't beat your kids, they'll end up like me. And then the song goes into a whole nother different stanza of music, and Prince talks about love and trying to help everybody, and love is the answer, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I don't know if he was talking about, who he was talking about, but Prince basically, admits, hey, I did some fucked up shit, and, because of my abuse in that song. I mean, so, and I haven't gone deep, but, we're not, if this is the case, and it's starting to look that way because other people outside of the documentary are, poking around and finding other things coming out of his childhood. I mean, it sucks, but it looks like there's a possibility that Prince was, groomed people, but he groomed everybody. We've known Prince was a control freak since the 80s. I mean, if you're a hardcore Prince fan, you do that. This explains some of that, and I don't know, where Prince, but Prince told on himself a lot. He saw this coming, and I do think Prince is kind of moving into that Richard Pryor, a territory of keeping it really, really, really real, which I think is admirable. But the other thing, in some ways, with Prince telling on himself, he's kind of taking accountability too. I mean, I'm sure he apologized to Jill Jones if it happened. I mean, Prince isn't a total asshole and whatever, but and admitting to your mistakes is a form of accountability. So it'll be interesting to see, because look, I mean, as I said, eventually this will probably be released in its entirety as the fan base, digest it. Just like, people Michael Jackson's fan base, his hardcore and his not so hardcore, people, digested the whole thing. And I talked to, about, a year or so, after, finding Neverland, a very close friend who's a huge Michael Jackson fan. She said the same thing I'm saying about Prince now. I wasn't there. I don't know. I hope it's not true, but human beings, are complicated and they're complex, and everybody does bad things, but I love his music. I'm going to listen to his music. So, yeah, on that note, that's kind of where, once the fan base digests, and once most of them get to that place, maybe Lindell will release because I mean, more books are going to come out of this, and people are going to follow the breadcrumbs and talk to, follow this. And, again, Prince essentially admitted, when on camera, with My Tay, that's, I don't know what else you can call that other than grooming. So, I don't know how deep that goes, but nobody's perfect, and he overcame a lot, and Prince's life was a journey, and we got to look at it as a journey and appreciate. And I think, really, everybody who's seen it, who I saw and watched on Facebook, said they all had a better appreciation for Prince afterwards, and was actually more into Prince's music after seeing the 9-hour documentary than before. And we know the only Princeologist who's seen it so far was Questlove, and how, he had to call his therapist and how that affected him, because, and I'm sure at some point, I don't know how, in what detail Questlove will go into, some of the other things. There's just a lot there, and that if you're not a Princeologist or a hardcore Prince fan, that you're going to miss, that these more casual, Prince fans didn't see. And I'm sure, Questlove saw them all, but, look up his, Google his reaction, and hey, it is what it is. But anyway, so I wanted to weigh in, for the record, if I get, before the estate releases it, if I get access, I'm watching it. I ain't even gonna sit there and lie. And I'm not gonna go out there and talk like Funkatopia, like, if you're a real Prince fan, you're gonna watch it. I know some real Prince fans who won't watch it, so I'm not gonna go there, but I'm gonna watch it to get a better appreciation, of what makes my mentor Prince Rogers Nelson tick. And this explains why he was so great. And also, I mean, where did he find the courage to tell us a lot of this stuff? I mean, a lot of this stuff, most of the the stuff that they want to take out, Prince already told us. And Prince has said, on numerous occasions, if you want to, know who I am, listen to my music. So, I mean, that statement's even gets, deeper every day for me. The other thing, I'm glad I was about to close, but I'm glad I remembered this quote. So My Tay, in her book, early on in her book, the advice that Prince gave to her as a artist, because she was a dancer, he told her to live life like it's a work of art. And I remember reading that, and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I don't know what the fuck it means right now, but yeah, I want to get to that place. And I'm slowly getting to that place, and that's a different place for everybody. But the fact that Prince told us about a lot of these negative things in his work, being it Purple Rain or in his music, goes back to that live your life like it's a work of art. And it's, taking the good and the bad, learning. Prince understood, his place, in the art world, and his impact on, the artists coming up behind him who looked up to him, and his leadership and all that. And it's just, and we're just scratching the surface on this Prince, moving into Richard Pryor territory. But it's just, it's another level. It's just another level of genius for Prince. And I know there was some pushback, when Big Sexy on the Prince podcast, the podcast Juice, he mentioned, hey, he talked about the treatment of women, in Purple Rain, and, essentially said the same thing I did. People probably went to Prince, like, let's take the slapping of Apollonia out and throwing the woman in the dumpster. And Prince was like, no, it's staying. You know what happened. So, hey, on that note, man, I'm sure I pissed some people off, in the Prince fandom. That's fine. Everybody has their opinions, and hey, whatever. Everybody, takes in Prince differently. Look, there's the whole Diddy thing going on, and there's people on YouTube speculating about Beyonce. Now, I'm not a Beehive person. There are men in the Beehive. I'm not one of them, but I love Beyonce's music, so I'm going to enjoy her music and could give two fucks whether, she was at a Diddy's sex party or not. And then there's a lot of people with Prince who take that same approach. It's about the music, it's about the performance, and that's, so I get it, because I'm the same way with Beyonce, hey, I'm focusing on the music. So whatever. Everybody has a past, and I don't know Beyonce's past, but yeah, she was promiscuous back in the day. Probably about half of us listening to this damn show could fall under that. Okay, I don't know, don't care. Give me whatever. Give me some of Beyonce's good music, and I'm good. So anyway, on that note, let me get out of here. It's my longest episode ever. Surprise, surprise. But I love me some Prince Rogers Nelson. Well, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I assume there'll be some follow-ups with books. I think it will. It might be 5 to 10 years, but I think it will, be officially released. And at some point, let's be real. We're entering in, I never thought I would say this, but Prince bootleg era 2.0, we're back in the Black Album, because this is going to get bootlegged, it's going to get out there, and folks like me are going to watch it. I'm just being real. So you can get mad at me for it or not, but I told, and I understand, it's your thing, get mad at me if you want, but anyway. Let me jump out of here. Got 5 albums of my own. Six, sorry about that. 6 albums. I recorded under the name Exodus, Xodus. I'm on all the streaming services. My first album is called Book 1. I do have the 317 Volume 1 and Volume 2. So those are 3 of my album titles out there. I also write science fiction, fantasy. Have 2 novels and novella on Amazon under the name Peter Exodus O'Coffer. So thank you again for coming through. Look forward to doing some more Prince episodes and just, music appreciation and genre and branding. And again, going back to Prince and branding this, I think this Richard Pryor aspect is fascinating. I think that expands his brand and it actually strengthens his brand. The controversy, Prince is bulletproof to that. He always played in the contradictions, sexuality and religion, in the 80s. And then, in the 2000s, you know, he played, contradictions again because he would, run you down, and take a video of a baby dancing to his music and go and run after folks who were putting unauthorized photos up on the internet. But, the bootlegs, nothing ever happened. And then, there was reading recently, too, that he did the Camille album. He took the Camille album. This is the album following, before Sign of the Times. So Camille was the first album, then it was Crystal Ball, and then it morphed in. So Camille was the voice from House Quick and If I Was Your Girlfriend. And he did a whole album of that. I think it was only 8 to 10 songs. But he went to Warner Brothers like, hey, release this album as Camille. Don't put my name on it. And, and again, this was Prince doing the Mystique thing. And Warner Brothers like, we want to make money off this. And if your name is not on it, it's not to make money. Fuck that. So and then he came back with the three disc Crystal Ball and, Warner Brothers like, nope. And then, so we ended up with Sign of the Times. So look, if Prince is, and I think that's a legitimate story. I mean, and I said, on my episode on Prince and bootlegs that Prince knew. I mean, all he had to do was change the damn combination of the vault, and that stuff wouldn't get out there. It wasn't like, YouTube didn't exist. So you couldn't get a primer on how to bounce down, a song from the 24-track machine to a cassette. So the Princes leave come on. Prince was working at bootleg scenes, it enhanced his mystique. So anyway, on that note, again, controversial and people will push back on it, but hey, come on. I'm a musician and a Gemini. I ain't, I know where Prince is coming from. So on that note, I'm out of here and have a good evening and thank you again for coming through.